Are you working on your author career but struggling to get that first book published? Does the goal of being an author seem too lofty? Or thoughts of having multiple books and making a full-time living are as fantastical as living in Cinderella's castle? Welcome to Discovered Wordsmiths, a podcast where aspiring authors can be heard. Join Stephen Schneider as he finds and talks to authors you may not know, but authors that have gotten their foot on the author career path. Hear what they've done to get there and where they want to go now. Settle back. It's time for a bit of inspiration and advice. Come listen to today's Discovered Wordsmith.
All right, well, today on the podcast, I've got Brooke Davis. So welcome, Brooke, to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. And I don't know, is it snowy where you are? We've had snow lately.
You know what? We did get just a little bit of snow, but it's supposed to be warmer and it's melting off very fast, as it always does here in the Rocky Mountains. It seems to snow and then go.
Nice. Yeah, well, we've actually had more snow this year than the last couple. So I like snow, so that's good.
I do too. And we could use a little bit more, but we'll take what we get.
Right. So, Brooke, before we get started talking about your book, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you like to do besides writing.
So I'm originally from Southern Indiana, and I grew up there, and I went to school there. My schooling was in business, ironically enough. Grew up in the country, love to be outside, photography, hiking, traveling in the West. I've been in Colorado over 20 years now, and just love it. Love going around in the mountains. Yellowstone Park is a favorite. Montana is a favorite as well.
So you're an outdoor person.
Mostly in the fall and the spring. Not so much in the summer. It can get a little warm, but it is beautiful here in the West most of the time. So yes, I like being outdoors a lot.
With all these activities, could I ask, is writing your full time or do you have a day job?
Writing is I would like for it to be my full time. It is not quite full time yet. I also have a certificate in wellness coaching. So that's what I do along with writing.
Several things together. What made you decide to start writing?
Writing has always been an outlet for me, just really of thoughts and emotions. I have been journaling for a long time, and I know that writing a book is very much not the same. But it was really about getting thoughts and feelings out to work them out. And then I really started wondering, could I write an entire book? Is that something that I could pull off, or would it be horrible? Or could I actually make something into a book that I would be proud of? And it kind of just went from there. And because I am so very creative, I think that's where it came from. It just really was an outlet for that creativity that I wasn't really able to express as part of someone who was doing a more analytical job in finance.
Okay. So like a lot of authors, using writing to get your thoughts and feelings out, and kind of felt a pull towards writing.
Absolutely. And I think it has to do with the storytelling. I think that is one of the most important things in writing, is that ability to tell a story and to not only like it yourself, but to say, wow, would somebody else benefit from this? Could they be amused or transported or whatever, regardless of genre? I think that storytelling is the most exciting part, and putting those pieces together as a writer, it's just become more fun and more engaging to me as I've gone along.
Okay. I like that. And I think a lot of writers share that viewpoint. Did you say, how long have you been writing?
I've been writing off and on probably for about 8 years now. I think I wrote the very first draft of something that may never see the light of day in 2014. We have those. Sometimes it's like, that's just going to go in the back of the desk and stay there. But yeah, I think it's really been off and on for about 8 years. So it's been quite a while.
And so you came in when things were really heating up with Kindle and ebooks and all that.
I wish I had come in a lot earlier, before they had changed some things. They still offer such a wonderful service now, but because I didn't get published until last year, I still consider myself really a newbie, since it's my first book and the first time going through that process. Technically, I was writing when it was new, but I didn't actually get in the game until last year.
Okay, so you've still seen some changes over the last couple years and
Yes.
still been able to get your book published.
Yes.
So your book is called The Adventures of an Urban Homesteader. Tell us about that, what the title means and what the book is about.
So, The Adventures of an Urban Homesteader, The Diary of Kendall Whitney, is about a young woman who really needs to figure out how to adult. And she's 28 years old. She moves from San Francisco to Montana. She's moving to Bozeman. Bozeman is not a super small town, it has about 50,000 people and a university. So, it's not the super small town, but it's not the super big city either. And she really launches herself on this quest for independence. What does she want as far as a career? What does she want in a relationship? And then she has some really fist on forehead, face plant humor stuff of how to live alone. So she's really trying to figure these three things out during the book, along with a very funny and endearing cast of characters that are trying to help her along the way.
And you talked about a couple things you wrote before this. What made you finally want to write this book and get this particular book out there?
So I think I had to think about that for a while when you had sent me that question. I'm like, how did this happen? Um, Really, what happened was the first thing that I wrote that probably will not see the light of day was very heavy and very serious and pretty emotionally draining to write. And I realized afterwards, I'm like, I need to write something fun and lighthearted that is going to make me laugh, that is going to make people laugh. And so that's how this came about. And I've been to Bozeman many times. I've been going up there with my family and on my own since the early 90s, late 80s. And I'm like, I think I can write about this well enough to know the town and also from this point of view of saying these are some things that could happen along the way that could be really fun and educational and enlightening to this character.
So, like a lot of authors, you wanted a book that resonated with you, which would then resonate with others. But also, if it wasn't out there, then you might as well be the one to write it.
Right. And I knew by writing it in diary form, which it is in, it would be a little different. But I also had that concern of this cannot be Bridget Jones' diary, and it's not. So that was definitely a consideration of saying this needs to be different. Kendall Whitney's journey is different than Bridget's journey in many ways. And so I had that in mind as well. But mostly it was about telling a fun and lighthearted story that moved along with relatable characters that people are like, oh, yeah, that's probably happened to me. That was embarrassing. Let's not do that again, type of thing.
Right. uh, and this is traditionally published, or you published it yourself?
I did self publish this one.
Did you consider trying to traditionally publish, or did you always want to publish it yourself?
I always wanted to self publish this one. I think in the future, I would consider some type of hybrid publishing with traditional and self. We'll kind of see how that plays out. But for this one, I really did want to self publish this one.
Do you have plans for a follow up, or is the next book something completely different?
The next book is something completely different.
And the current book, have you gotten any feedback from readers? What are people saying about it or telling you?
You know what? For the people that it's really speaking to, it has been very relatable, very funny, mostly positive reviews. And some people, it truly is not their cup of tea. But for the people that are really kind of into that and are getting the humor, they are really enjoying it. I would say it has some pretty good reviews out there on Amazon and Goodreads right now.
And you said it's on Amazon. Are you just on Amazon, or do you have it available elsewhere?
I do have it available elsewhere. It is also on Kobo, Apple, Barnes and Noble, and Google.
And so the next book, can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yes, the next book is a micro memoir. I hope to publish it sometime in 2021. The working title is Without You, I Would Be Nothing. And it's nonfiction as a micro memoir. And my interpretation of micro memoir is short memoirs. And I kind of mashed two books together. So there's an author named Beth Ann Fennelly. She had a micro memoir book called Heating and Cooling, and she had 52. And then Grant Faulkner had a book of stories called Fishers, not fishers with a fishing pole, fishers as in Fissures. And each of his stories were exactly 100 words. And I thought, what would happen if I wrote 100 micro memoirs that were exactly 100 words each? And yes, that is as daunting as it sounds.
Wow.
um, so that
Nothing like a good challenge.
exactly. And it really was, but it forces you to be really smart with language and emotion and what you want to convey. And that book right now is in the beta reader stage. So it's moving along. And again, I hope to have that out. I do plan to self publish that one as well, hopefully sometime in late summer, maybe early fall.
Even though it's nonfiction, just from what you're talking about, it sounds like your style of writing it will be very similar to the quirky humor from your first book. Does that sound accurate?
There's definitely some quirky humor in there. It does take on more of a serious tone. It's about really talking about how place, experience, and people move through your life. And it talks about the aging process. It also talks about me losing my father to Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and how it kind of moves into that. But there's definitely a mix of that quirky humor in there as well.
The Adventures of an Urban Homesteader. How much would you say is like a reflection from your experience and life compared to the memoir?
I want to make sure that I understand your question. I definitely think there were some reflections of things that did happen to me in Adventures of an Urban Homesteader. Because we're going from fiction to nonfiction, I mean, clearly as a micro memoir, it is very, very personal. Stylistically, there will definitely be some things that are similar, but because I chose to make everything 100 words in that micro memoir, obviously that was more challenging. Is that's kind of what you were wanting to know?
Yeah, I guess a lot of times when we write, we write a story that is not based on our life, but we put a lot of ourselves into it, and obviously that's what a memoir does. I was just curious if your fiction book was a bit of a fictionalized account of some of your life or experiences.
I would say in many ways, no. It really was Kendall's experience. I definitely think there were bits and pieces there. But I think really Kendall, the main character in Adventures, is her own person because she comes from a very large city and I did not. I did not have that experience growing up. I also am an only child and Kendall has siblings. So I would say there are a few things, but not too much. She really is her own woman in that book.
And are you finding any challenges going from fiction to nonfiction?
Luckily enough, I didn't. Probably because I had been working on this micro memoir project. And in all honesty, I told my editor I almost didn't do it because I was like, who is going to want to read this? And I'm like, no, the more I got into it, I'm like, there are nuggets of wisdom here that I think are useful and valuable. So I went ahead and did it. And she's given me some really good feedback on the book. So I'll be very excited to see what the beta readers have to say. I think it will have been a good use of time in the end.
And one more question on your book. Do you think you might write a sequel to the fiction book, Urban Homesteader?
I don't have plans to. I think I could, but I don't have plans to at this time. Let's put it that way.
I find interesting because there's so much of a push nowadays for everything being a series that you write 3 books of anything instead of just one.
Right, which is
And I think that
that's going to be fascinating because I have writer friends who very much write in the series. I tend to write my ideas as single standalone books. So, yeah.
and that's completely valid. I think too often people get stuck on, oh my God, everyone's saying I have to do this. And you don't necessarily have to. There are plenty of books out there by authors that are standalone without being in a series that are very, very popular.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you, when you were growing up, I assume you've been reading for most of your life. What are some of your favorite books and authors?
So I did have some in childhood. Most of the authors that I've been reading lately that have come to be my favorites. One is Kate Morton. She wrote The Distant Hours, also The Clockmaker's Daughter. I read The Distant Hours in one day. I literally could not put it down. I had the Olympics on
Well,
mute.
that's a good recommendation.
Yeah, I had the Olympics on mute. I talked to my mom for 30 minutes and I'm like, I gotta go because I gotta finish this book. um,
Nice.
MJ Rose also is one of my favorites. Eleanor Brown with one N. She wrote The Weird Sisters. And then also, I tend to not read a lot of fantasy books, but I'm becoming more interested in them. One of the authors that I read recently was Tessa Gratton, and she wrote The Queens of Innislear. And I have her latest one called Lady Hotspur, but I've not started it. So yeah, those are some of the authors I've been reading that I really do enjoy.
Great. I'll have to make some links to those. I haven't heard of most of those. And you live in the Rocky Mountains. Do you happen to have a local bookstore that you enjoy going to?
Absolutely. I live in suburban Denver. So the local bookstore that I go to is Tattered Cover. And it's been on the scene for like 50 years here in the Denver area.
Nice. Yeah, I love bookstores that have a quirky little flavor to them.
Yeah. It's kind of an institution here.
Okay. So Brooke, to finish up our talk about your writing, tell people why you think they should get your book, The Adventures of an Urban Homesteader.
If you're really looking for a laugh and you enjoy romantic comedy, focused really on a quest of, is she going to achieve the independence that she wants in the areas of her life, and she quite frankly going to survive living in Montana after having lived in San Francisco. Really, it's just a lighthearted, kind of fun, beachy read that will transport you for a while and hopefully leave you just really satisfied with the ending.
Nice. This just popped into my head. So would you picture this book as being a movie or a TV show?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting question. I would say off the top of my head, it strikes me more as a movie versus a TV show, but I could see where things could be episodic with her various quests in life. But yeah, probably a movie around the hilarity of adulting, really.
Well, you could always push people that if they like Bridget Jones' Diary, read this.
Yeah, it is different in some ways, but if you like diary form and you're really on that quest for independence and trying to see if she actually pulls off the trifecta in trying to adult, then definitely so, yes.
Well, tell us again the name of the book, where to get it, and if you have a website where people can find you.
Yes, so the name of the book is Adventures of an Urban Homesteader, and my website is www.brookdaviswrites.com, and Brooke is spelled with an E. You can get it there. You can also get it on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, Barnes & Noble, and Google. And I do have
Brooke,
I do have both print and ebook editions available.
Nice. Let me ask, a lot of people don't do print nowadays. Why did you choose to do print?
I think because I'm one of those readers who likes to hold the book in my hand. If I'm reading, generally I'm reading from a paperback or a hardback, in all honesty. And I also think that as a new author, I really just wanted the experience of holding that hot little book in my hand and saying, I did this, because it's a big deal. Right. It takes a long time. It's quite the journey. And at the end of the day, you really sometimes just want to have that thing you can hold in your hand and say, look what I did.
And that's a very valid. I think a lot of authors like that tactile, hey, I have an accomplishment. I agree. It's not as fulfilling to put up a digital bunch of zeros and ones.
It's really not. I mean, it's so awesome and amazing that we can do what we do now as writers, but there's still something about holding that book in your hand.
Great. Well, Brooke, I appreciate you taking a couple moments to talk about your book today. And we are going to continue in a moment with the second half where we talk about getting it done. So thanks for being on today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Discovered Wordsmiths. Come back next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe, sometime in the near future, it might be you.